Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. And yesterday we talked about that big Gamescom event. A ton of games was announced yesterday, and in fact it was actually 46 different game announcements. Yeah, a lot of things happened at Gamescom, but we still do have plenty to talk about today. Gaming news just never really stops. And well, now there's quite a big conversation surrounding the PlayStation 5 and that solid-state drive. And this is all because of a video game director, designer, writer, and programmer is actually claiming that Sony lied about the PlayStation 5 solid-state drive. Or more specifically, that Sony lied about games like Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart only being possible on the PlayStation 5 because of that solid-state drive. This has created quite a stir online, as you'd expect, and we'll go over all of that later on today. Also, Psychonauts 2 is out, and it seems like a lot of people are really enjoying it. I'm absolutely loving it myself, and it appears Xbox was a big reason on why this game turned out so well. Yes, Double Fine did go into some detail about that Xbox acquisition, and it was really interesting to hear what they had to say, so we, of course, will go over that as well. First, though, we do need to talk about some news for a current Nintendo Switch exclusive, and the keyword there is current, because Bravely Default 2 has now been confirmed for a Steam release, and I mean, this is coming out right around the corner. Yeah, that's right, Bravely Default 2 is set for a September 2nd release on Steam. So there you have it, and this honestly is an excellent JRPG. I really do believe this is one of the best JRPGs that's released in 2021. And I mean, if you like the old school Final Fantasy games like Final Fantasy IV, then you definitely need to check out Bravely Default 2. Bravely Default really is a Final Fantasy game without the Final Fantasy name, and in fact, I believe that the first Bravely Default game was actually being developed as a Final Fantasy game, and then they just changed the name to Bravely Default. So this series very much has a lot in common with your old school Final Fantasy games, and if that's something you like, you need to check this game out. It's interesting to see Bravely Default 2 head to Steam really this soon though. We kind of saw this happen with Octopath Traveler. It did release originally as a Nintendo Switch exclusive, and then about a year later, it came to Steam. Now we're seeing a similar thing here with Bravely Default 2, but in a much shorter time frame. This time it is really only about a half a year, and this is actually important for other consoles as well, because Octopath Traveler this year also released onto Xbox through Xbox Game Pass. So it is possible that Nintendo and Square Enix had a similar deal with Bravely Default 2, and this game could appear on other consoles in the future if it does have a similar contract. We'll kind of see what happens with all this, but this is definitely really good news for Steam. Steam's JRPG library continues to grow, and for that matter, this would be a great game for that Steam Deck. Yeah, the Steam Deck continues to sound like a really, really good console. Definitely excited to get my hands on that when it does eventually release. Let's talk about the Borderlands studio Gearbox, though, because it looks like they're opening up a brand new studio over in Montreal, Canada. Yeah, Gearbox is expanding, and it does look like this new studio will continue to work on more Borderlands games, but interestingly enough, they're also going to be establishing brand new IP. And that right there is the exciting part. I mean, it's always good to see more Borderlands games. The Borderlands universe has been interesting throughout the years, whether that be with the Borderlands trilogy. You have that new Tiny Tina game coming up, which looks really interesting. And then you also have the Tales of Borderlands games. Those have all turned out pretty well. So it's not really too surprising to see them work on more Borderlands games. But with the talent behind this studio, yeah, it'd be interesting to see what they can do with new IPs as well. And here with this new studio, they're actually being co-led by the co-leaders for Tiny Tina's Wonderland. So, I mean, they already have some talent here, and I mean, if you like the Borderlands franchise, then I really only see this as good news. Not only are you going to get more Borderlands games out of this, but we're going to get some new IP as well. And that's always an exciting thing to me when you have talented studios working on new, completely new IP. We'll kind of see how all that plays out, but it definitely seems like Gearbox has some pretty big plans for the future, and not just with these studios, but I think that they're going to continue to try to expand that Borderlands universe even more. Moving on though, let's talk about the PlayStation 5 and that solid-state drive. And yeah, this is definitely sparking a pretty heated debate in the game industry right now. But John Burton, the founder of Traveler Tales, which has directed several LEGO games over the years, claimed over on his YouTube Coding Secrets channel that Sony indeed lied about the solid state drive. Now, I would actually recommend watching his video about this topic because he explains it incredibly well. I mean, he has developed several games in the past, so he definitely knows what he's talking about. But the reason he made this video seems to be because Sony's wording, or Insomniac's wording, about Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart and that solid state drive. PlayStation and Insomniac claimed that Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart was only possible because of the solid state drive, and John Burton does not believe that's the case, and he goes through several examples on why that's not the case. He even goes so far to say that older hardware such as the PlayStation 3 could do a lot of what you saw in Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. He actually talks about a LEGO game that he worked on in the past that has some features like this. So he actually has some experience with techniques like this that he's used on games himself. And that kind of seems to be his point here. Now, he's not saying that the solid state drive doesn't help out with sections like this or anything like that, or as he words it, to do everything properly. But he does, however, point out that you can actually use trickery to do some of the things that we saw in Rift Apart on hardware as old as even the PlayStation 3. Let's just go and take a look at exactly what he had to say, though. The way the Rift gameplay was represented before launch was pretty misleading, and that what was shown as amazing sequences of Ratchet zipping between many other worlds all chained together into awesome action sequences ended up being mostly just cutscenes or very short sections of very limited gameplay. He then goes on to talk about the different techniques that you can use to make sections like the pocket dimension or those cinematic experiences where, you know, Ratchet is zipping from one world to another and how you can actually make those work. He does point out that the pocket dimensions are mostly filled with generic objects, which makes these relatively quick to load. As for the small stages that we've seen PlayStation and Insomniac kind of showcase with Rift Apart, he went on to explain into detail how you can make that work as well, so let's just go and check that out. The important thing to note here is that none of this is optional, it's forced. This is important because it means that you can preload the grind rail section while you are playing the speeder section. In fact, every section of the sequence is both forced and small. You only move across a very small part of the world and have very little ability to even move during the section. This means the game has the whole time you're playing the section to load in the next section. So imagine the game has two memory buffers. The first buffer holds the section you're currently playing in. While you're playing it, it can load the next section into the second buffer. To transition between the buffers, you can just have a very simple intermediate void location permanently in memory to hide any swap over glitches that might happen. He then kind of points out that each section is about 8 seconds long, which gives them plenty of time to load in the next section, which again has a limited amount of gameplay. And that right there is what he's trying to point out. Not that the solid state drive doesn't help make this happen, but really that you can use some trickery to make this stuff happen as well, which could overstate the importance of that solid state drive. And that is something that Sony was very clearly marketing with the PlayStation 5, that Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart was not possible on older hardware. And I think to an extent that is true, because even though he does point out here that you can do some of the things that you saw in Rift Apart on older hardware by doing some load time trickery, he did also note that the solid state drives helps do everything properly. And I think better wording for that would be that the solid state drive helps things to be more smooth. So I think on one side, yeah, you have PlayStation, which, you know, they're going to market the PlayStation 5, and they might be embellishing the solid state drive and how important it is. Games like Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart could probably have been done on some older hardware, though again, as he points out here, I don't think it's going to run as smooth as Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. I imagine with Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, it's probably a little bit of a combination of both. On one side, you do have that solid-state drive, which does make Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart load much faster, but then it also probably does have some trickery running in the background as well. So with the combination of two, it just becomes this really impressive overall showcase. And there's really nothing wrong with that. I myself love Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart because I think it's an excellent overall game. And I do think that those load sections are very impressive. So I don't think that that should be taken away from Insomniac at all. But yeah, PlayStation might be embellishing the PlayStation 5 solid-state drive just a little bit. We're already kind of seeing it with the Xbox Series X as well as with these third-party NVMe solid-state drives. They do load very comparable to that PlayStation 5 solid-state drive. So, I mean, I don't think it's got this just massive, just huge advantage over everything else on the market. But obviously, the PlayStation 5 has a very good solid-state drive, and Sony's going to use that to their advantage. They're going to market it that way, but yeah, let me know in the comments below on what you think about this. Do you agree with John Burton here that Sony is being misleading when it comes to that solid-state drive? Let me know in the comments below. Next up, let's talk about Double Fine, which released Psychonauts 2 earlier this week. Now, I'm just going to go and say it. If you haven't tried this game out already, definitely go do yourself a favor and check it out, whether that be on PlayStation, Xbox, or PC. Check this game out. I had previously stated on this channel that my current game of the year was probably It Takes Two, which is a phenomenal 3D platformer that emphasizes cooperative gameplay, but I might have to change that over to Psychonauts 2 now, because this game is flat out a masterpiece. I mean, it is a special game for several different reasons. The characters, its story, its gameplay, atmosphere, music, and its graphics are all absolutely top tier. This game is a serious Game of the Year contender, and I think it once again has just proven how talented Double Fine actually is. See, the thing about Double Fine is they do often make these high-quality games that goes a bit under the radar, but here we're seeing with Psychonauts 2, a lot more people are starting to recognize just how talented they really are. And a big part of that is that Xbox acquisition. Xbox is actually helping Double Fine reach their full potential. That's something some fans don't seem to be grasping as of this moment, but they have been acquiring some of these studios that does have some potential, but with that extra budget, they could really end up making some truly special games in the future, and we're already seeing that here with Double Fine. In fact, Microsoft did give Double Fine an extra budget and allowed them more time to really make Psychonauts 2 into what it is today. Because of that, Double Fine was actually able to go back and re-add in some cut content that they previously cut from Psychonauts 2. So Xbox actually did help out with this game, and you're really seeing that with the final product, and something that people aren't really talking about, but this game graphically looks really good. It's something that I've actually been really impressed with when it comes to Psychonauts 2. But yeah, Tim Schafer was actually asked about that Xbox acquisition, and let's just go and check out what he had to say. We've been given so much creative freedom now. Nobody has probed Psychonauts to second guess our decisions or anything like that. We've been trusted to handle the creative side completely, but we can opt into all these resources, like having it tested for accessibility and mental health checks. We had the resources, but we're left creatively to our own devices. And that's been great, and Microsoft has lived up to their word as far as what they said before the acquisition. I would constantly be thinking about how I was going to make payroll in a few months, and now I don't have to think about that at all, so that's a huge load off. That's been replaced with regular meetings with other studio heads at Microsoft to check in, but the tax on my mind for those meetings is a lot less than the tax of going out and shaking the trees for money all the time. So there you have it. Tim Schafer himself has confirmed that Microsoft is not just all talk right now. They are indeed giving these studios complete creative freedom. And for a studio like Double Fine, that is really big, because they are very creative, as we're seeing with Psychonauts 2, and we could continue to see them make some really special games in the future. Hey, I'm going to cross my fingers for a Psychonauts 3, but I imagine we're going to get a lot of new IP from them as well. Really, though, we have been hearing from several of these newly acquired Xbox studios that they do have creative freedom, and that could be a really good thing for quite a few of these studios that I think does have potential, whether that be a studio like Ninja Theory, you have Obsidian, Compulsion Studios. That's one of their studios that I would consider to be a bit of a dark horse. They're talented as well as very creative, so I'll be interested to see what they make for the future. But yeah, I in particular, though, I'm very excited for Double Fine going forward. Either way, though, it definitely seems like Phil Spencer has changed the culture for Xbox. Now, speaking of Xbox, we might as well go and talk about Xbox Games with Gold, as they have now officially announced the September lineup. And yeah, let's just go and check it out. You have Warhammer Chaos Bane, Mulaka, Zone of Enders HD Collection, and then Samurai Showdown 2. And overall, I think this is a pretty decent lineup. Nothing really stands out here as being overly amazing, but Warhammer Chaos Bane, that's a pretty decent game. And then you do have the Zone of Enders HD collection. Now, Zone of Enders may not be a game that some of you all immediately recognize, but this is actually a game coming from Hideo Kojima. Yeah, Hideo Kojima is a legend in the game industry for his work on Metal Gear Solid. He's done great things with PT, and then you have Death Stranding as well. But yeah, he also developed Zone of Enders. So if you do like Hideo Kojima and his work, yeah, you might want to check this one out. Overall, though, I think that this is a relatively decent month for Xbox games with gold. Let's go and take a look at that poll of the day, though, and with that big Gamescom event taking place yesterday, I wanted your all's opinion on what you thought of that event. So I asked you all, what letter grade would you give Gamescom opening night live event? And it does seem like, for the most part, you all really enjoyed that event, with 51% of you giving it a B. And I think that's pretty fitting. I'd probably give this event a B+ myself. Now, I've kind of criticized Jeff Keighley events in the past because I feel like oftentimes he does make them a little bloated, but I don't think that was the case with Gamescom. He did a really good job pacing this event out. I did think that it got a little slower there at the end, but for the most part, there was a lot of really exciting games that was announced here, whether that be with Halo. You have DokeV, which looks absolutely insane. You have King of Fighters 15. There was that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was there. Call of Duty Vanguard's looking really good. And yeah, there was a load of games here to just really look forward to. So yeah, I really enjoyed Gamescom this year, and I can definitely go away with thanking the rest of 2021 and really into 2022. There's just a lot of games to look forward to, and that's exactly how you want to leave in an event like this. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget to bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.